He was the most feared man in the room, until she became his wife and saw the heart he tried so hard to hide. This deeply emotional historical romance will carry you through secrets, scandals, and a love born not of perfection, but of truth, vulnerability, and unexpected tenderness. Lady Blanchfield's never imagined her life would intertwine with the Duke of Thornwood, a man whispered to be dangerous. But behind his reputation was a wounded soul, and a heart that had been waiting just for her. If you're someone who believes that love can heal even the oldest scars, and that it's never too late to feel something real, this story is for you. A tale of redemption, courage, and the quiet strength of two souls who dared to trust again. Doris hit the marble floor so hard the chandelier above her trembled, because the Duke Edmund Hawthorne had just shoved her out of the path of a dagger meant for her throat. The weapon skidded beside her, still humming with deadly intent. Gasps rippled through the ballroom, but all Doris heard was her own heartbeat thrashing against her ribs. "Stay down," Edmund barked, his voice a whip of authority. But she was already scrambling up, breath sharp and shaking. Moments ago, she'd walked into the winter solstice ball thinking her greatest threat was the sneering aristocrats whispering about her handmade gown. But now someone had rushed her with a blade meant for her. Edmund spun toward her, chest rising and falling like he was fighting the urge to tear the whole ballroom apart with his bare hands. His jaw clenched, eyes blazing with something she never imagined the Duke of Hawthorne would direct at her. Fear. "He was aiming for you," he growled. "Not me. You. Why would anyone? You don't need to understand. You just need to keep breathing." He seized her wrist and pulled her through the chaos. Ladies sobbed against brocade sleeves. Lords shouted for guards. Violins lay abandoned, their strings still quivering. Doris stumbled after the Duke, her legs barely cooperating, her mind drowning in shock. He guided her through a side corridor dimly lit by lanterns. His hand didn't leave her, even though his grip was firm enough to tremble. "Did you recognize him?" "No, I've never seen." "Doris." Her name cracked through the silence like thunder. "Don't lie to me." "I'm not lying," she snapped, tears burning at the edges of her vision. "I don't know why anyone would want me dead." He stopped abruptly, turned to her, looked at her like she was the only thing in the corridor worth seeing. "Because someone believes you know something," he murmured. "Or because they want something that involves you." "That makes no sense," she whispered. "Not to you," he said. "But earlier today, I received a note delivered without a signature or crest. Just a single line. 'The girl is the key.'" Her breath stuttered. "The girl? Me?" "Yes." His voice dropped lower. "You." He opened a concealed door behind a tapestry, ushering her into a warm study lit by a fire. It felt safe, until she remembered safety had just tried to stab her on a ballroom floor. Edmund paced in front of the fireplace, his black coat shifting with every sharp turn. "Tell me anything unusual that's happened. Anyone who's approached you. Anything you've noticed." She swallowed. "There was something." He stopped dead. "There was a man outside my family's bookshop yesterday," she said softly. "Tall. Watching me. I thought perhaps he was waiting for someone." "Describe him," Edmund said. "He wore a ring," she murmured. "Gold, with a serpent wrapped around a sword." Edmund's expression shifted from anger to something much darker. "The Order of Helios." "The what?" "A brotherhood of aristocrats who believe in ancient oaths. Dark oaths." He dragged a hand through his hair. "If they're watching you, Doris, you're in far more danger than I feared." "Why me?" She hugged her arms around herself. "I'm nobody." "You are not nobody," he shot back, too quickly. Then he closed his eyes, breathing hard. "And they clearly don't think so either." A knock startled them both. Edmund moved instantly, shielding her with his body. "Who is it?" "Thomas, your grace." came a trembling voice. The guards found something. Edmund opened the door just enough for his steward to slip inside, pale and shaking. Thomas held a folded parchment sealed with black wax. The intruder dropped this, he said. It has her name on it. Doris felt the fire behind her go cold. Edmund snatched the note, broke the seal, scanned the message, and the color drained completely from his face. What does it say? She whispered. He lifted his eyes to hers, something furious and terrified swirling together. They're not trying to kill you, he said. Not yet. Then what do they want? They want you taken to the abandoned winter chapel before the next full moon. Alone. Her chest tightened painfully. But why? They say your bloodline carries something they need. My bloodline? She echoed, stunned. But I'm just... A sudden shatter of glass exploded somewhere down the corridor. Both of them turned. Edmund's voice dropped to a deadly whisper. They've breached the west wing. Thomas lunged for the door to brace it. Your Grace, they're coming. Edmund grabbed Doris's shoulders, his voice fierce, urgent, absolute. Listen to me. Footsteps thundered closer. You are not safe here. The lantern flickered violently. When I tell you to run, Doris, he breathed, pulling her close. You run. You don't look back. You don't hesitate. You obey. Her pulse throbbed in her throat. The door handle rattled. Edmund. His eyes burned into hers. Doris. He pushed her toward the hidden exit. Run. Doris collapsed onto the cold floor of her family's crumbling Ashbourne estate, gasping as if the storm itself had followed her inside. Rain pelted the broken windows, drumming a relentless rhythm against the walls. Every heartbeat in her chest felt like a drum of accusation. She had survived the night's terror, but the weight of what Edmund Hawthorne had revealed, or more terrifyingly, what he had withheld, pressed down on her like stone. Her younger brother, Thomas, peeked from the shadows, eyes wide. Doris, are you hurt? She swallowed hard, shaking her head. No, not hurt. And yet, her body trembled with a mixture of fear, relief, and guilt. He knows. Edmund knows everything. The thought clawed at her from the inside. She had spent years hiding, navigating the rigid expectations of society while masking her secret. And now the man whose name alone silenced the tongue knew it all. The estate was a fragile reflection of her own life. Peeling wallpaper, a hearth long cold, and portraits of ancestors who seemed to stare with judgment as though aware of every misstep she had ever made. Doris rose shakily, brushing dust and grime from her gown, and moved toward the library. This was the room where she could think, where she could pretend that knowledge and books could shield her from reality. Her thoughts, however, were relentlessly invaded by the stormy figure of Edmund, the Duke of Blackmore, feared by all of London, a man whose reputation could crumble a family in a single whispered sentence, had stepped into her life, and not to punish her, but to protect her. Why? She wondered. Why would someone so powerful, so untouchable, care for a girl like her? She sank into the leather chair, wrapping her hands around the mug of bitter tea she had barely sipped. The taste of ash and bitterness mirrored her life perfectly. She had been trained in propriety, in keeping her emotions cloaked under lace and poise, but the truth was a different matter. I am a criminal in their eyes, a girl who hides behind false smiles and whispered apologies, she thought. And now Edmund had seen her completely. Footsteps echoed in the corridor outside, hesitant yet deliberate. Doris stiffened, heart skipping. She imagined the eyes of the Serpent Court, watching, judging, waiting. Perhaps they had followed her even here. Perhaps the danger had never left. Doris! Thomas's voice was a whisper, almost drowned by the wind. She shook her head, trying to focus. Go back to your room, she said firmly. Stay hidden. She could not allow anyone else to be caught in the shadows that now haunted her every step. Alone again, she let herself remember the night of the dagger, the sudden weight of Edmund's presence, and the impossible command, run. Her mind flitted to the Duke's expression. His jaw set, eyes burning, but there had been no accusation. Only understanding. Only protection. And yet, in that protection lay a tension she could not ignore. It was as if the house itself pressed in on her, every floorboard groaning under the storm, every shadow a reminder that she was never truly alone. Doris walked to the window and stared at the skeletal trees, their branches clawing at the sky like desperate hands. I am trapped, she thought. Trapped, she whispered to herself. Trapped in my past, my mistakes, my guilt. Her hand brushed the edge of the writing desk where letters and ledgers lay scattered. A letter from a society acquaintance caught her eye, the elegant script a reminder of the world outside her walls. Balls, gossip, whispered scandals. Life went on for the ton, oblivious to the crimes, the secrets, the dark games playing out behind closed doors. If only they knew what was really at stake. The wind rattled the window pane violently, and she flinched. Another thought struck her, sharp as a blade. Edmund had made his choice. He had intervened, watched over her, and yet said nothing of judgment. In doing so, he had shifted the axis of her life. She could never return to the girl who feared scandal alone, who hid in shadows hoping no one would notice her. I am tethered to him now, she realized. Tethered, whether she wanted it or not, to a man whose darkness mirrored her own. A knock sounded at the library door, deliberate and quiet. Doris froze. Her pulse pounded so loudly she could hear it over the storm. "Who is it?" she called, trying to keep her voice steady. "Doris?" came a low voice from the other side. She recognized it immediately. Edmund. Her knees weakened. "Edmund?" she whispered, the word carrying every ounce of fear, relief, and longing she could not yet name. The door creaked open just enough for him to step inside, tall, commanding, yet oddly vulnerable in the flickering candlelight. "You're awake," he said, voice controlled but heavy with unspoken emotion. "Yes," she breathed. "And you? Why are you here?" "Because I am not willing to let you face this alone," he said, stepping closer, his eyes scanning the room as if the shadows themselves might strike. "Because I saw what you did, and I know the truth about the threats closing in on you." Doris felt the weight of the world press down on her chest. Fear, guilt, and a flicker of hope tangled inside her. "Then, you protect me?" Edmund's gaze softened, but the intensity never left it. "I protect you, always. But remember this, danger does not rest. And neither can you." A sudden clap of thunder shook the walls. Doris swallowed hard, gripping the edge of the desk. "Always?" She repeated the word silently. Could someone truly watch over me, knowing all, and still care? She looked up at him, breathless. "And if I fail?" His hand reached out, brushing hers, not with touch alone but with promise. "Then we fail together," he said. "But fail we will not." Outside, the storm raged on. Inside, Doris felt the first stirrings of courage, the dangerous flicker of trust, and the impossible pull of a man who had stepped from shadows into her life, holding both protection and peril in one steady hand. "What would you do?" she whispered to the empty room. "If the one person who could destroy you chose instead to save you?" The letter arrived at dawn, drenched in rain and sealed with crimson wax that bore no crest she recognized. Doris trembled as she broke it open, the words inside slicing through her chest with sharp precision. "We know. You cannot hide what you did." Her stomach churned, bile rising. Someone knew. Someone had seen. And the weight of exposure pressed down harder than any storm outside. Her hands shook as she crumpled the paper. How had they found out? How could anyone know her secret? Her crime. Her desperate act that had saved her brother yet damned her soul. She felt as though the walls of Ashbourne itself were closing in, suffocating, condemning her. Every instinct screamed to flee, but flee where? There was nowhere safe anymore. A carriage wheel clattered sharply on the gravel outside, startling her into sudden awareness. Through the rain-spattered window, she glimpsed a tall, imposing figure stepping down onto the wet stone. Edmund. Her heart jolted, a storm of fear and something else, something she could not yet name, rising inside her. The door opened before she could move, and he entered, his coat dripping with rain, hair plastered against his forehead, eyes blazing with a mixture of calculation and intensity. "Doris," he said quietly, his voice calm yet carrying the weight of authority that could crush or protect her. "I've come because there is no time for hesitation. You need to leave this place with me." Doris recoiled, shaking her head. "Leave? Where?" "Edmund, I can't. My family, my brother." "I know," he interrupted, moving closer, the heat of his presence tangible even through the chill of the room. "Which is precisely why I've come. They're watching you. Someone is blackmailing you, threatening everything you care about. And if you do nothing, they will destroy you, and make me a part of your ruin by association." Her pulse raced, heart hammering against her ribs. She swallowed hard. Why are you here? Why not let them expose me?" "You could." "I could," he said, his eyes locking onto hers with a force that made her knees weak. "But I didn't, because I protect those I choose to. You are not to face this alone. You will come with me. You have no other choice if you wish to survive." The words hung in the damp air, mingling with the scent of rain, wet earth, and the faint musk of his presence. Doris felt the ground shift beneath her, her world tilting on its axis. She wanted to resist, to assert control over her own fate, yet the cold logic of his proposal left her no argument strong enough to stand. Marriage, the thought hit her, sharp and unavoidable. This is what he wants, marriage. Protection in exchange for a bond one can never undo. Edmund's gaze softened for a fraction of a second, revealing a hint of vulnerability that she had never expected from a man whose reputation alone could silence a ballroom. "I offer you safety," he said, stepping even closer, so that the warmth of his body brushed against hers. "And in exchange, a solution to the threat that shadows you. You will marry me, Doris. Not for love, not yet, but to survive." Doris's breath caught. Her hands trembled against her sides. Marriage. The word struck her like lightning. She had not imagined this, not in her darkest nightmares. And yet, the promise in his eyes, the unspoken knowledge, the silent protection, made it both terrifying and impossible to refuse. You know," she whispered, voice barely audible. "You know everything." "I know enough," he said, voice low, commanding, almost reverent. "Enough to know that your life is in danger, and enough to know that I will not let it be taken from you. You will come with me or—" He paused, letting the unspoken threat linger. "You will face ruin alone." The storm outside thundered, echoing the tumult within her. Her mind raced. If she refused, she would be at the mercy of whoever had discovered her secret. If she accepted, she would be bound to a man whose reputation terrified the ton, and who had seen her in her darkest, most vulnerable moment. Her eyes lifted, meeting his, and for the first time, she felt the strange pull of trust, a dangerous, seductive trust she could scarcely allow herself to feel. "And if I agree?" she asked, voice trembling. Edmund's lips curved into the smallest of half-smiles, a shadow of warmth across a face carved by grief and determination. "Then you survive. Then you have a chance to live beyond your past. And I will ensure no one ever uses it to harm you again." The silence stretched, heavy with the gravity of decision. Doris's chest heaved with a mix of fear, anticipation, and the faintest spark of something like hope. She could feel the future twisting before her, uncertain yet inevitable. Finally, she nodded, barely a whisper. I will go with you." Edmund's hand lifted, brushing against hers in a gesture of possession, protection, and promise all at once. "Then we leave at once," he said, voice steady, commanding, "because time is already running out, and those who hunt you will not wait." As the carriage wheels clattered back to life, Doris stole one last glance at the Ashbourne estate, fragile and fading, and felt the full weight of her choice. She was leaving behind her old life, the safety of secrecy, the illusion of control, and stepping into the unknown with a man who knew her darkest secret. And Edmund, ever silent and watchful, seemed to carry not just her future in his hands, but the unspoken vow that he would guard it with his own life. In that moment, Doris understood the peril, the power, and the forbidden promise she had just accepted. I am his now, she thought, and he knows all. The carriage lurched into the rain-soaked dawn, and for the first time, she felt both fear and the electric thrill of survival, and the dangerous, intoxicating certainty that nothing would ever be the same again. "What would you do?" she whispered to herself. "If the man who could ruin you chose instead to save you?" Doris froze in the hallway of Blackmore Estate, the torchlight flickering against the stone walls, as if the shadows themselves were whispering secrets she could almost hear. Her heart thumped so loudly she feared the sound would betray her. Every instinct screamed danger. Every instinct except the one telling her that Edmund was near, always near, watching, waiting, protecting. The moment she stepped inside the grand hall, she understood the full weight of the Duke's world. The estate was magnificent, but it carried the scent of grief and whispered tragedies. Velvet drapes hung heavy, undisturbed, yet a faint chill seemed to creep along the floor. Portraits of ancestors with cold, piercing eyes watched from gilded frames. Locked doors lined the corridors, their keys hidden, and every shadow hinted at a story she wasn't meant to know. Edmund emerged from the darkness, tall, imposing, dripping rainwater from his coat onto the polished floor. His gaze met hers, sharp and unreadable, yet laced with an unspoken message. "You are safe, for now. You shouldn't linger in the hall," he said, voice low, commanding. "Not until you understand this place." She followed him, yet every step echoed too loudly in the silence, reminding her that she was a stranger in a fortress brimming with secrets. Her eyes darted to the door slightly ajar down the hall, the sound of faint scratching coming from behind it. Goosebumps rose along her arms. "Do you hear that?" she whispered. Edmund's hand brushed hers, not by accident, but a silent tether that reassured and restrained at once. "Some things here do not wish to be discovered," he said, "and some eyes watch more closely than any servant." Doris shivered. The estate already felt alive with mysteries. Servants moving too silently, portraits that seemed to follow, tapestries swaying though no draft existed. Every whisper she caught seemed to contain judgment or warning. And above it all, Edmund's presence was a constant storm, thrilling, intimidating, protective. Their first evening together was a silent dance. Candles flickered as they walked the corridors, exploring rooms locked for decades, uncovering books and letters, documents she could not yet decipher. In the library, she found coded messages hidden in the margins of books that smelled of must and ink. The thrill of discovery clashed with terror. She knew danger lurked, but part of her felt alive in ways she hadn't known since her crime. "Why protect me?" she asked suddenly, voice trembling despite her effort to sound steady. Edmund's jaw tightened. "Because you cannot face them alone," he said, eyes flashing with an intensity that made her stomach flip. "Because I have been waiting for someone who is as damaged, as haunted as I am." Doris swallowed hard. His words, meant to console, cut deeper than any threat outside these walls. The slow burn between them ignited with a friction she could neither name nor resist. Hands brushed accidentally or deliberately, under the pretense of guiding her through a dark hallway. Every step felt like trespassing, not just through the estate, but into something forbidden and urgent. Outside, the storm raged, wind tearing at the battlements, rain lashing the stone. Yet inside, the tension was hotter than any weather. Cedric's shadow was everywhere in her mind. She had caught a glimpse of him in a reflection once, sharp, smiling, and cold, like a serpent poised to strike. She could not forget that he was watching, waiting, and using her secret as a weapon. Edmund seemed to sense her unease. "Do not let him scare you," he said, placing a gloved hand on her back, guiding her gently into the warmth of the drawing room. "Fear makes one sloppy. You are stronger than you think." Doris wanted to believe him. She wanted to trust him fully, yet the memory of the blackmail letter still burned in her mind. Could anyone truly protect her from the consequences of her own past? And yet, in Edmund's eyes, there was no judgment, only an intensity that made her pulse race and her breath catch. Hours passed in quiet exploration and muted conversation, punctuated by moments of friction and silent longing. Her hand lingered near his arm, tempted to brush it, to see if he would notice. He did, and when their eyes met, the air between them seemed to hum with unspoken promises, tension, and the thrill of danger. A sudden noise from the upper gallery, a floorboard creaking, made them both start. Edmund's gaze hardened, and he moved in front of her, protective, commanding. "Someone is here," he whispered. "We are not alone. Never think you are safe entirely, Doris. The walls themselves are watching." Her heart lurched, but she felt a strange calm under his shadow, a thrilling paradox of fear and security. And in that moment, Doris realized that she was not just surviving this estate. She was being drawn deeper into its secrets, its dangers, and into Edmund himself. As the storm outside began to subside, she knew the night had only just begun. And somewhere in the shadows, Cedric was already plotting, waiting for a mistake. Doris clenched her fists, determination flaring. She would not be caught unprepared. Not tonight, not ever. Edmund's hand brushed hers again, light, deliberate, a tether to safety and danger intertwined. She met his gaze, feeling the weight of their unspoken understanding. Together, we navigate this darkness, or fall into it. "What would you do?" she thought, "if the man who could terrify you also became the only one you could trust?" Doris stumbled backward, her fingers clutching the edge of the desk, as the letter in her hand trembled like a live thing. The ink had faded, but the words were clear enough to make her stomach twist. He saw everything. He never forgot. Her breath caught. Every shadow in the room seemed to stretch, pressing in with judgment. She had believed herself clever, cautious, untouchable. But the truth now slammed into her with the weight of a falling chandelier. Edmund had been there the night of her secret crime. Not a shadow in the distance. Not a fleeting glimpse. He had witnessed it all. "Doris?" The voice came low, measured, yet threaded with something she could not name. She spun to see Edmund standing in the doorway, his coat damp from the evening rain, eyes dark and unreadable. His presence filled the room like a storm, yet somehow, inexplicably, it was also a refuge. You saw me?" Her voice trembled. "You could have. I could have exposed you." He interrupted softly, stepping closer, each footfall echoing against the hardwood. "I could have let the law take you, but I didn't. Not then. Not ever." Her heart stuttered. Why protect her? Why not punish her for the crime that could have destroyed everything? She wanted to retreat, to run, to hide in the shadows she had always commanded. But something in his gaze anchored her, pulled her forward, made her chest ache in ways no fear ever had. "It wasn't just that," Edmund continued, his voice a growl that somehow soothed her nerves. "There's more. The same society that haunts you, the one that drove me to the edge after Isabella, they are the same. They're watching. They are waiting. And now you are part of their game." Doris felt the ground tilt beneath her. The serpent court, the whispers, the disappearances, the coded letters, they were all connected. Her crime, her fear, Edmund's pain, everything intertwined. The world she thought she controlled was nothing but a fragile mask, ready to shatter at the slightest touch. She sank into the nearest chair, hands pressed to her face, feeling the first tremor of despair she hadn't allowed herself to acknowledge. Edmund knelt beside her, the scent of wet earth and leather clinging to him. His hand hovered near hers, then finally settled with deliberate tenderness. "You are not alone," he said. "Not in this. Not in any of it." Doris looked up at him, the room spinning with revelation, attraction, and terror. His presence was suffocating and electrifying. Every muscle in her body tensed as if awaiting a strike, yet he offered only safety. It was maddening. It was irresistible. "I don't deserve," she whispered. "I don't deserve your protection, your trust." "You are braver than you know," he replied, voice soft but unwavering. "And stronger than you believe. That is why I've been waiting for someone who can stand with me, not against me. Someone who understands what it is to be hunted, to be haunted, to carry a darkness inside and still fight for light." The room seemed to contract around them, the air thick with unsaid confessions. Doris realized, with a mix of fear and yearning, that her walls, the ones built over years of shame and survival, were crumbling brick by brick. And Edmund was not breaking them with force. He was letting her fall, letting her choose, letting her trust. Her hands trembled as she reached for the journal she had found days before, filled with coded notes, letters from Isabella, and cryptic hints of the Serpent Court's plans. She opened it, revealing a folded note in Isabella's handwriting. The words were elegant, precise, and chilling. "Trust no one but the one who saw you in your worst moment." Doris's eyes met Edmund's, and the world seemed to narrow to that single moment. His lips barely parted, as if holding back storms of unspoken emotion. Yet in his gaze, she read the truth she had never dared to hope. He had chosen her, not as a pawn, not as a secret to be hidden, but as an ally, a partner, a force to face the darkness together. Her chest rose and fell in rapid, unsteady breaths. The past, the crime, the fear, the endless nights of solitude, was still hers, but she was no longer carrying it alone. Edmund's presence was a tether, a promise, a challenge. "Then we face it," she said finally, voice steadying, determination threading through her fear. "Together." Edmund's eyes softened for a fraction of a second, a glimpse of warmth beneath the storm. "Together," he echoed, as they stood, shoulders brushing, hands almost touching. The first quiet thunder rolled beyond the estate walls. It was as if the storm itself had recognized their alliance, their fragile bond forged in shared darkness. Doris realized, in that instant, that this revelation, this shared vulnerability, was more dangerous than any blade, more intoxicating than any whispered vow, and more binding than any marriage contract. And yet, despite everything, she felt alive for the first time in years, because for the first time someone had seen her and chosen her anyway. "Do you trust me?" Edmund's voice was almost a whisper, a test, a question that would shape everything to come. Doris met his gaze, heart pounding, and nodded. "Yes, I trust you." The fire in the hearth crackled, shadows dancing across their faces, and in the silence that followed, both understood the unspoken truth. From this moment forward, there was no turning back. The game was on, the darkness waiting, and together, they would face it or fall. The scream tore through the halls like a blade, sharp, unrelenting, and filled with terror. Doris froze, her hands clenching the damp fabric of her skirts, as the realization hit. Cedric had found her. The Serpent Court's shadow had finally breached Blackmore Estate, and she had no allies in sight. Edmund's voice, low and strained, came from the staircase. "Doris!" His command was desperate, filled with authority and fear. She turned, only to see him stagger, clutching his side. Poison. Cedric had anticipated their moves. He had struck first, and the Duke, mighty as he was weakened. The servants fled, whispers of betrayal and panic trailing behind them. Every corridor seemed alive, echoing with sinister laughter and muffled footsteps. Doris's heart pounded like war drums. The estate that had felt like a sanctuary now reeked of danger. Every shadow was a threat, every door a trap. Her mind raced. She could save herself or attempt to save him. But Cedric had been meticulous. Every exit sealed, every ally compromised. Her crime, her secret, the very thing Edmund had protected her from. It now made her vulnerable beyond imagination. And worse, she believed she had caused this. "Doris?" Edmund gasped, staggering toward her, his hand reaching out but faltering. His eyes, usually sharp and commanding, were clouded with pain. You must." Before he could finish, the doors burst open, Cedric's men pouring in like a tide of darkness. Doris's stomach churned. Their eyes, merciless, calculating, locked onto her. It was as if her past sins had painted a target on her back. Her chest tightened, and she realized that if she did not act, Edmund might die, and she would be left alone with her guilt, hunted and exposed. Her mind, sharp and desperate, grasped at the journal tucked beneath her skirts. The coded messages, Isabella's notes, hints of the Serpent Court's plans. They were her only weapon. If she could decode them fast enough, perhaps she could turn the tide. But the men were closing in. Time was a luxury she did not have. Edmund fell to one knee, his hand brushing hers. "Trust me, I've survived worse." His voice trembled with pain but also determination, a flicker of the man she had come to rely on shining through the haze of venom and betrayal. Doris shook her head, fighting back tears and terror. I cannot." "Yes, you must." His words were sharp, almost desperate. "You are stronger than they think. You are stronger than you believe." The men seized her, hands gripping her arms, jerking her toward the hallway. Her heels clicked against the stone floor, echoing like gunshots in the suffocating silence. She struggled, claws of fear and fury latching onto her resolve. The thought of Edmund lying there, poisoned and bleeding, propelled her forward. In a flash, she remembered a secret passage described in Isabella's journal, a narrow, forgotten stairwell behind the East Wing tapestry. With a sudden lunge, Doris twisted free from one man's grasp, sending him crashing into a marble pedestal. Her heart raced as she ducked, rolled, and bolted through the hall, Cedric's men in hot pursuit. Edmund, gathering the last of his strength, staggered to his feet and shouted, "Doris! Behind the tapestry! Now!" His voice was a lifeline, cutting through the chaos. She reached the wall, pressed her hand against the cold stone, and pulled aside the heavy tapestry. A narrow, spiraling stair revealed itself, dust motes dancing in the flickering torchlight. Without hesitation, Doris slipped inside, dragging herself up the cramped space, adrenaline screaming in every nerve. But even as she climbed, her mind was a storm of dread. The Serpent Court was relentless. Cedric's betrayal ran deep, and Edmund's poisoning left him vulnerable, perhaps fatally so. She could not fail him. She would not. Her pulse pounded in her ears as she reached the top of the stairwell, emerging into a hidden chamber. A room lined with books, letters, and documents untouched for decades. The air was thick with dust and the lingering scent of old parchment. Yet every piece of evidence here was a thread she could pull to unravel Cedric's plot. Doris sank to the floor, heart hammering, hands shaking as she spread the journal and notes before her. She realized the magnitude of what she faced. Not only was her life at stake, but Edmund's, and perhaps the fate of the entire estate. The distant shouts of Cedric's men grew louder, echoing through the secret corridors, and Doris drew a deep, shuddering breath. Her crime, once a private terror, had now thrust her into a war she could not avoid. And in the center of it all, Edmund, wounded, poisoned, but unbroken, relied on her courage. She whispered to herself, a vow sharper than any blade. I will not let him fall. I will not let him die. Not while I draw breath. The storm outside mirrored the chaos within, lightning slicing through the hidden windows, illuminating the resolve etched onto her face. Every heartbeat, every pulse of fear, was a drumbeat of defiance. She would fight, she would endure, and she would survive. Cedric's shadow loomed over them all, but Doris felt the first spark of unyielding fire within her. A fire that would not be snuffed, no matter how deep the darkness pressed. The sound of the shattered window echoed like gunfire through the Blackmore estate, and Doris's heart seized in her chest. Edmund had escaped, barely, but the blood on his sleeve and the weakness in his step made her stomach twist. Cedric's men had underestimated him, but not by much. She gritted her teeth, refusing to let fear root her in place. Every second counted. Her hands shook as she clutched Isabella's coded journal, scanning the pages for the instructions that could dismantle the Serpent Court. A map slipped from between the brittle leaves, revealing a hidden tunnel beneath the East Wing Gardens. An escape, a trap, a weapon all at once. Edmund! She called, voice cracking, desperate and sharp. The corridor ahead seemed endless, twisting in shadows and echoes, but she pressed forward. Then, from the flickering torchlight, he emerged, pale, exhausted, but alive. His eyes, dark and smoldering, found hers, and relief and fury collided in a silent storm. Doris, he rasped, his hand reaching for hers. I thought. You live. That's what matters. Her words were fierce, unsteady, but real. Her fingers brushed his, gripping in desperation, anchoring them both. Moments later, Cedric's men appeared, rounding the corner like predators circling their prey. Edmund, though weak, drew himself tall, a lion wounded but unbowed. Go, he commanded. Use the tunnels. Doris hesitated for only a heartbeat before realizing the truth. She could no longer hide behind fear. With the journal in one hand and his in the other, she sprinted toward the hidden entry, Edmund just behind her. Their bodies collided briefly in the narrow stairwell, a mixture of pain and relief passing between them. At the bottom, the secret passage smelled of earth, decay, and possibility. The walls closed around them, damp stone pressing in as they ran. Doris's mind raced, decoding the symbols and clues Isabella had left. Every step, every turn, brought them closer to a plan, closer to justice, and farther from Cedric's reach. Edmund stumbled, his strength faltering. Doris grabbed his arm, supporting him with every ounce of courage she had left. I've got you, she whispered, voice trembling. We do this together. He smiled, faint, but it carried more warmth than any candlelight. I never wanted a wife again, he admitted, voice hoarse. But I never stopped waiting for you. The tunnel opened onto a hidden courtyard, moonlight spilling across the cobblestones. Here, the journal revealed the final piece, a set of instructions to expose Cedric's betrayal to the Tun, to reveal the Serpent Court's members hiding in plain sight. Doris's hands moved quickly, tracing the path of letters and hidden keys, her mind sharp despite exhaustion. Then, a shadow moved, Cedric himself, emerging from the darkness, cloak fluttering, eyes wild with rage and disbelief. So, you've led him here, he spat at her. You think you can undo what I've built? Doris swallowed the fear that threatened to choke her. She met his gaze squarely. No, she said steadily. But we can stop you. Edmund stepped beside her, strong despite the pain, radiating command and loyalty. Together, they confronted Cedric, the storm above reflecting the chaos below. The duel of words, strategy, and cunning began. Every whispered threat from Cedric met with meticulous counter from Edmund and clever insight from Doris. Minutes stretched into eternity, but finally, Doris found the final key hidden in Isabella's notes. a confession Cedric had tried to bury, proving his role in Isabella's death and his manipulations since. She raised it like a weapon. "This ends now," Cedric faltered, his face twisting into rage and disbelief. Edmund's stride forward, steady and unwavering, sealed the confrontation. With the Tun's hidden allies exposed and the Serpent Court crumbling, Cedric had no choice but to retreat into ruin. Doris's chest heaved, exhaustion and triumph mingling. Edmund leaned close, brushing her hair from her damp face. "You were magnificent," he said, voice low, almost reverent. "I could never have faced this without you." Tears pricked Doris's eyes, and she laughed softly, disbelief and relief dancing together. "We faced it together," she corrected, gripping his hands. "And we survived." For the first time in days, the weight lifted, and the estate felt alive again. The storm outside matching the calm they had earned inside. The shadows still lingered, but they no longer held power over them. Edmund drew her close, their foreheads touching, hearts beating in shared rhythm. "We end this together," he whispered, sealing the vow not with words alone, but with the unspoken promise of partnership, trust, and love forged in darkness. Doris nodded, letting herself finally feel it. Hope, love, and the strength she had thought lost. The night may have been their crucible, but it had also been their awakening. Together, they would reclaim Blackmore Estate, their future, and their hearts. Lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating the jagged cliffs beyond Blackmore Estate, and Doris felt her stomach drop. Cedric had cornered them in the secret tunnels, his laughter echoing like a death knell. The air was thick with damp, dust, and tension. Every heartbeat hammered in her ears as she gripped Isabella's journal like a lifeline. Edmund, though bruised and poisoned, stood firm, his eyes blazing with unyielding determination. "This ends tonight, Cedric," he said, voice low and dangerous, cutting through the storm's roar. Cedric's smirk twisted, revealing a cruel satisfaction. "Ends? No, cousin. This is only the beginning, for you, for her, for everything you hold dear." Doris swallowed, feeling fear claw at her chest, but she refused to back down. She had come too far, risked too much. She stepped forward, her hands trembling yet steady, the journal pressed against her heart. "He doesn't stand alone," she said, her voice growing stronger. "I stand with him. We end this together." Cedric lunged, and chaos erupted. Torches fell, smoke curled, and the narrow tunnel became a battlefield of shadows and whispered threats. Edmund blocked Cedric's strike, the force sending him stumbling into the cold stone wall. Yet he pressed on, driven by anger, love, and righteous fury. Doris ducked behind a low arch, flipping open the journal and scanning the coded letters Isabella had left behind. Every symbol, every annotation now became a weapon, a key to exposing the Serpent Court's corruption. Moments later, Doris found it. A confession Isabella had hidden, proving Cedric's murder of his own cousin's wife, the first Duke's widow, and detailing the network of hidden agents embedded in the Tun. Her pulse raced. This was their leverage, their ultimate defense. "Edmund," she called, breathless, holding the pages aloft. His eyes caught hers, burning with clarity and hope despite his exhaustion. She ran toward him, her steps echoing in the narrow passage, each stride carrying desperation, courage, and the promise of justice. Cedric sneered, raising a dagger, but Edmund anticipated, twisting, intercepting with a strength that belied his weakened state. Their struggle was brutal, intimate, almost a dance of fate and fury. Doris, heart hammering, memorized the positions of the hidden alcoves and secret doors. The estate itself seemed to conspire with them, guiding her movements like Isabella's ghost watching from beyond. Then, with a decisive step, Edmund tackled Cedric, pinning him against the damp wall. The villain's rage flared, But the evidence in Doris's hands struck him where words and power could not. Undeniable proof of his crimes. Cedric's smirk faltered, then shattered entirely, replaced by blind fury and disbelief. Doris pressed forward, standing shoulder to shoulder with Edmund, reading the final lines aloud. Every word, every revelation echoed like a hammer striking truth. The Serpent Court's members, their plots, their poisonings, their manipulations, all exposed. The power that had haunted Blackmore, that had threatened her, Edmund, and Isabella's memory, crumbled into the stormy night. Cedric's final, desperate scream echoed through the tunnels as he was seized by loyal servants long hidden in the estate's shadows, summoned by Doris's careful orchestration. Edmund, breathing heavily, dropped to one knee, pulling Doris close. "You were brilliant," he said, voice hoarse with relief and awe. "I could never have done this without you." Doris laughed softly, disbelief and exhilaration mingling. "We did this together," she corrected, pressing her cheek to his chest, feeling his heartbeat. Steady, alive, hers to trust. The storm outside mirrored the storm they had survived, lightning illuminating the stone walls and casting fleeting shadows of victory. Edmund lifted her hand, kissed it, and whispered, "We're free, all of it, finally." Doris felt the tension unravel in her shoulders, her mind, her soul. The weight of fear, guilt, and secrets melted into a tide of relief and triumph. They emerged from the tunnels into the moonlit courtyard, the estate eerily silent except for the soft rustle of leaves and distant thunder. For the first time, Doris saw the estate as more than a fortress of fear. It was a place of life, history, and legacy they would now reclaim. Edmund brushed a wet strand of hair from her face, eyes softening with the intimacy they had fought for. "You chose courage," he said. "You chose love, even when it scared you most." Doris smiled, letting herself finally feel it. The triumph of truth, the liberation of secrets, the union of hearts forged in darkness. She leaned into him, breath mingling, hearts beating in perfect sync, knowing this night, this victory, would forever mark the beginning of their new life. Together, unbroken, and unafraid. The first rays of dawn cut through the morning mist, casting a golden glow across Blackmore Estate, and Doris felt as if she were seeing the world for the very first time. The night of storms, of danger, of secrets unveiled, had left them alive, victorious, and irrevocably changed. She inhaled the crisp air, the scent of wet earth and lavender from the Duke's gardens filling her senses, grounding her in a reality that was finally free of fear. Edmund emerged from the shadows of the great hall, his coat still damp, his hands marked with the evidence of their battle. But his eyes, those fierce, relentless eyes, were soft now, warm with relief and pride. "Come to me," he murmured, voice thick with emotion. Doris's legs carried her forward, the distance between them dissolving with every step. They met at the garden terrace, the morning sun glinting on the ornate balustrade. Edmund pulled her into an embrace that felt both protective and tender, the kind of touch that had once been impossible for her to imagine. Her head rested against his chest, and she could hear the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, a sound she had longed for in the dark hours of the estate. "You were extraordinary last night," he whispered. "Without you, none of this would have been possible." Tears pricked Doris's eyes, not of sorrow but of profound release. "We did it together," she said softly, her voice catching. "You saved me, and I found the courage to fight." Edmund tilted her chin up, capturing her lips in a kiss that was slow, deliberate, and full of unspoken promises. It was a kiss that sealed their victories, their secrets, and their love. Behind them, the estate stirred to life. Servants emerged, cautiously at first, then with smiles and murmurs of relief, their loyalty and fear finally replaced by respect. Cedric and his Serpent Court had been removed, their schemes unraveled, their influence broken. For the first time in years, Blackmore felt like a home, not a battlefield. Doris looked out over the restored gardens, the dew sparkling on roses and ivy, feeling the weight of the past lift from her shoulders. Her younger sibling, safe and protected, ran laughing across the lawns, a symbol of all she had fought to preserve. Edmund's hand found hers, fingers interlacing naturally, and she realized that trust, once impossible, had become their greatest strength. "You've changed everything," Edmund said quietly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Not just for me, not just for the estate, for yourself." Doris smiled, her heart full, knowing he was right. She had faced darkness, secrets, and fear, and emerged stronger, braver, and capable of love. As the morning sun climbed higher, they walked together toward the horizon of their new life. Every whispered rumor, every shadowed corridor, every threat of scandal and betrayal had led them here. And now, at last, they were free to love, free to live, and free to write the rest of their story together. Doris glanced at Edmund, a soft laugh escaping her lips. "Would you have stayed by my side if I had not been worth saving?" she teased. He smiled, a rare, genuine curve of lips that reached his eyes. "I would have followed you through every shadow, through every storm, and I will always." The estate, the gardens, the world beyond. The future lay wide open, brilliant and unafraid. And together, Doris and Edmund stepped forward, hand in hand, into a life earned through courage, trust, and a love that had conquered even the darkest of nights. "Would you have faced your darkest secret for love?" Edmund asked, pulling her close once more. Doris's gaze met his, steady and unwavering. "Always," she whispered,